Welcome to this episode of the Health Hexagon podcast with me, Kevin Hunt. Today I'm going to talk about exercise, consistency with exercise, and why it's darn difficult. Now, it may be hypocritical or ironic that I'm talking about consistency around something, given that I haven't produced an episode of the podcast for some months. But as you know, we have a finite amount of time and an infinite number of distractions, and it's not always easy to be consistent around things. Life isn't simple. Life is not a game of perfect. And we have our bucket that we need to fill, and there's many things vying for our attention. And it's not always simple to try and juggle our hexagon effectively and properly. So I'm going to talk today about a model known as the D.A.R.N model, D.A.R.N, which will help think through and talk through how we may be more consistent around exercise. But not only exercise, other elements of our life and our health hexagon. Now, as a physiotherapist, I'll see many people who come to me with their persistent back pain, neck pain, and very often getting the sweet spot for their physical self is an essential part of their recovery, their health and their well-being for their current and their future self. Finding that sweet spot isn't always simple because we have many things to juggle. We also need to find that sweet spot with their sleep, diet, cognitive load, emotional load, and that spiritual offloading, as well as the sweet spot with their physical selves. Now, I'll see many people with their persistent pain who are perhaps afraid to exercise, that they'll make things worse, or people who use exercise as their medicine and they're doing too much to try and manage other elements of their health, their mental health and their well-being. So we need to find a model that's going to help them to be able to change their behavior sufficiently to find the sweet spot for their physical selves. So the D.A.R.N model is such a thing. This is a model that's often used in motivational change in healthcare, but I'm sure it's used in other industries too. And there's a link at the bottom of this post with the details of that D.A.R.N model for people who want to read a little bit further. But let's talk through the process. D.A.R.N, D-A-R-N. D stands for desire, A for ability, R for reason, and N for need. So let's work our way through each of the elements of the D.A.R.N model. The first is desire. Do you have a desire to improve your physical self? To get fit maybe, get stronger, whatever that may be. Now, if you think of desire, there is a massive difference between somebody, for instance, who is seeking help with drug or alcohol addiction, who goes to seek that help themselves and desire a change to their lifestyle, versus somebody who is going because they've been mandated to by the courts or who is going because of a family intervention. We all would accept that the person who goes about it themselves, desiring that change of their lifestyle, is much more likely to be successful than the person's doing it through coercion or just trying to satisfy somebody else. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, do I have a desire to aim at this thing, whether that be physical fitness or otherwise? Next, we have ability. Most people have way more ability than they realize. If you're not in a hospital bed or prison cell or a slave labor camp, chances are you have oodles of ability. You're an adult, you can make your own decisions, you have choices. Hopefully you have some autonomy over your own decisions, or you can negotiate or navigate to be able to make certain choices. So ability typically is not a barrier. The next one is reason, and reason is probably the most significant one of the four, if we can have a significant four, but all four are required to help us succeed. Now, I will spend a lot of my time trying to help people really truly switch on to the reason for doing the difficult thing, like being consistent with their exercise. This podcast, the Health Hexagon, is all about trying to take care of your 85-year-old self or your future self, while your current self benefits from such things. So we can ask ourselves the question, will your 85-year-old self thank you for hitting that sweet spot with your exercise? And undoubtedly it more than likely will. But we also want to pay attention to the reason as it develops in front of us. Because very often what people find who get a healthy relationship with exercise is they discover that they feel better for doing the exercise. They maybe are more energized, they can think more clearly, they've got more range of movement or flexibility, the aches and pains aren't as bad, they may even feel virtuous, they may even feel a little bit on the smug side for being the person who makes the choice to go to the gym rather than sit on the sofa. So my advice to people very often is find that reason, find that deep, deep, deep down reason. Because if you explore that reason and that reason is strong enough that it gets you out on those cold, wet November nights, then that reason is pure enough that it's no longer really about choice. It's actually you truly believe in what you're doing. But pay attention as you go as to the reasons that present themselves. Maybe you feel less stressed. Maybe you blow off a bit of steam. Maybe that period of time you have with your exercise is your sweet spot. Maybe it's your spiritual space, just to zone out of the rest of the world. Maybe it helps you to put some boundaries in place for yourself, because that appointment with your personal trainer, or that appointment with that exercise class, or that run you do, actually enables you or forces you to switch off the laptop or turn off your phone and go and spend an hour doing that thing that's good for your current and your future self. So we have desire, ability, reason, and really keep checking in with the reasons as they present themselves. And then eventually you've got need. What do you need to be successful? Now, I'll see people over the years with their exercise routines and they're a bit boom and bust. They join a class, they go for a while, and then they give it up. Or they take on a challenge like train to run a half marathon or something, and they train and they do the half marathon, and then they stop running for months and months afterwards, or maybe never again. Or they're full of good intentions, joining the gym, go a few times, but typically life gets in the way. And there can always be those stories we tell ourselves. I'm too busy, or work is too busy, or the kids, or whatever it may be. And I appreciate none of these things are simple. I appreciate that we are being pulled in all sorts of different directions. But if you discover that your reason is strong enough, in other words, you notice, you know what? When I go to the gym, when I look after my physical self, when I go for that run outside and I get the fresh air and I get the daylight, I sleep better. I'm generally a more considered person to those around me and to myself. I have less reactionary, I have less aches and pains. Then maybe it doesn't become a convenience. It's actually a priority, helping juggle all of the elements of our health hexagon and making sure our bucket doesn't overflow. So what do you need? Maybe you need a personal trainer to be accountable. Maybe you need a friend who's going to knock on your door in the morning and take you there. Maybe you need to be part of a class because you just like being involved with a group of people and you connect to something bigger than yourself. Maybe you need to pay attention to your own behavior in the past, because maybe if you're being honest with yourself, you understand that you have great intentions and desire, but you don't necessarily follow through with them. You're not necessarily consistent about it. Sometimes we need to pay attention to our own behavior and have insight to that, which you could argue is, well, not even argue, it is in the emotional wing of your health hexagon, and learn from that behavior. You might go with good intentions, but you might need that friend to be there to support you and prompt you and work with you. I heard a couple of stories which I think are helpful in all of this. One story was about a lady who tried a number of different things when it came to exercise, and eventually she decided that she would go swimming, and she managed to convince a friend of hers to help her go swimming, but she needed this friend to go swimming, and they went swimming regularly, and it was very successful in and of itself. But one day she's at the swimming pool and she's in the dressing room and she's getting into her costume, and she gets a message from her friend saying, "I'm really sorry, can't make it today, something's come up, really sorry, see you next time." And instead of carrying on and, well, I'm already in my swimming costume and I'll just get into the pool, she changed out of her gear and went home. Now, she was 99.9% of the way there, but she wasn't 100% of the way there. She needed her friend to go swimming, and she needed her friend so much to go swimming that even though she was by the side of the pool in her swimming costume, more or less, she was not going unless her friend was there. Now, she needed her friend, obviously, to swim, but I would argue her reason for swimming wasn't powerful enough to be able to help her do that final little step. You're already there, you're already in your gear, you know you can do this. So as much as she was swimming with the support of her friend, which was probably helping her at some level, she wasn't truly committed to this. She didn't truly believe in it. She didn't really have the desire or really have the reason. She clearly had the ability, but she didn't have the real reason. So she had probably a little bit more work to do on finding what that was. But another story I really like about being consistent with exercise is another lady who tried many things with exercise over the years. She would join classes, she had personal trainers, she had gym memberships, she would sign up for charity events, and was very boom and bust about her relationship with exercise. Until eventually she discovered a website. And this website, you had to pledge that you were going to do something. And she pledged that she would walk for an hour a day, every day, for an entire year. Doesn't seem that arduous, very doable, but obviously she had to be consistent every single day for a year. And she had to deposit $1,000 into this escrow account of the website as a security for her commitment and her pledge. And someone else had to attest that she would actually have done her walk every single day. And if her walk wasn't attested and she hadn't done her walk, she would lose something in the region of $50 for every walk she didn't complete. Now, $50 isn't nothing, but we could understand that some days you might be incredibly tired, stressed, your bucket is completely full, the weather is horrendous, you're exhausted, and you think, you know what, $50, $50, I'm willing to sacrifice that $50. But here's the clever thing about that website. Not only did she have to put the money into the website as a security and pledge that that money would be lost if she didn't do her walk, she also had to nominate an organization that would get that money that she really didn't like. And she chose the National Rifle Association of America because she was very much against gun culture. And that incentive of not giving the NRA a single penny was actually what she needed to be successful. And no matter how tired she was, how busy she was, how stressed she was, how many excuses that she could perhaps legitimately argue to not go for her walk, her passion, her desire not to give her money to an organization she didn't approve of was more powerful than any of that. And she went for her walks every day. But in going for her walks every day, she discovered that she felt better for doing it. She was less stressed, fewer headaches, enjoyed actually being outside in all sorts of weather, and realized, as is very commonly the case, you can't control the weather, but you can certainly let it control you. But if you decide the weather doesn't matter, I'm going to go for my walk regardless, then you start to win, if you will, over those things. She also liked the casual interactions she saw with other people who were out and about walking at similar times to her. May never have spoken to those people, but it's nice to have a friendly nod or a wave or a smiley face as you go about your day. Just an acknowledgement that we're all in this together. All healthy things. And after about 6 months of doing her daily walk, she no longer needed the incentive of the NRA or anything else to actually do her walks. It had now become an established part of her routine. It was now a priority. It wasn't even a choice anymore. And she had started to really connect with the reason to do her walks was for her whole self. And there was always an excuse, but actually none of it really mattered when she was able to see that she could do this consistently over a period of time. So we need to find those reasons for ourselves when it comes to aiming at something that we desire. More than likely you have the ability, and maybe you don't have the ability to walk for an hour every day, but you might have the ability to do some small task towards your physical self. It could be a simple stretch, it could be just walking around the house, or of course it could be something more ambitious like running or joining the gym, lifting weights, whatever it may be. So when we think about being able to be consistent with exercise, you have to go through those steps. Ask yourself, do you have the desire? Do you have the ability? What is your reason? That is going to be the single biggest factor that means it's no longer a convenience or inconvenience or a choice. It's a fundamental to your overall health and well-being. And what do you need to be successful? Do you need the help of others? Do you need insight into yourself? Do you need just to be able to form that habit over a long enough time that the reasons start to emerge for themselves. But the D.A.R.N model, D.A.R.N, is a really helpful tool to help you when it comes to changing your behavior, be it exercise or anything else. Now, when we look at this podcast here, and I haven't done one for some time, for some months, and you could easily go, well, where's your consistency around your podcast? We have to then also consider, well, what's my reason for doing a podcast? Was my desire to do a weekly episode? Initially, maybe, but not really anymore, because I have come to understand that my bucket hasn't got capacity for a weekly episode, and I don't need to put myself under the pressure to produce an episode week in, week out. But I do find I need a creative outlet such as this. And if I produce an episode in an inconsistent fashion, that's okay. I'm at peace with that, because I have many other things that I need to be more consistent about than this. But nonetheless, this may be available to me for an indefinite period of time. And if I produce podcasts when I feel they're going to be helpful to someone as part of the bigger picture of the Health Hexagon, then maybe I just need to produce them randomly to a degree, rather than having to be consistent about it each and every moment, each and every week. However, with our Health Hexagon and our physical selves, that boom bust approach isn't always necessarily the best approach to our physical self. And how do we know the difference? How do we know when we're getting those sweet spots? Well, very often it's our pain system will tell us. And if you look back or listen to previous episodes about the purpose of the pain system, then you will have insight into knowing that our pain system is very often trying to prompt us to make the right choices for ourselves and to balance out all those sweet spots with our sleep, our diet, physical load, emotional load, cognitive load, and the spiritual offloading. And being consistent around our exercise, whatever that consistency looks like, is very, very important. For some people, being consistent around their exercise might be that they are exercising reliably 45 weeks of the year and they have 7 weeks where they don't. Or it might be that they need to do something physical every day, but they don't have to necessarily beat themselves up. If they don't run at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday, they're not necessarily a bad person, providing they're getting those sweet spots. Not too much, not too little. Not being obsessed or not being too casual. These are all the challenges we have, trying to find the balance with all of the elements for our current and our future self. So hopefully the D.A.R.N model can help you understand how we can set out a template for being more consistent or more reliable with our exercise, and ask yourself, what do you need to be successful? But above all, have you a reason that will help you get out there on those wet, cold, dark November nights because you believe in it enough for you, your current and your future self. Thank you for listening. If you like it, please share it and leave me some comments so we can talk more. Take care.